Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everything in Moderation, the International Edition. My two lovely people are here, Danny and Anthony. How you doing,
How's it
guys?
going?
How you doing?
So what are we talking about today, gentlemen?
Military coups.
Oh yeah, a whole lot of them, especially in Latin America. That's where we're primarily focusing on today. So let's find out why, you know, countries like America and Russia, especially, are involved in South America of all places. So let's just bring us back to a little bit of your history lesson. Have you ever heard of the Monroe Doctrine? Anybody?
Yes.
Yes, I barely remembered it before I started doing research on this topic. But basically, all it is a document that states America does not want European influence anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, and that includes Canada all the way down to South America. So, yeah, that's that guy. Doesn't he look classy, right?
I'm gonna take a little Jamie role right now. I'm gonna see how this works. Give our viewers a visual for the ones that are watching.
Yeah, so that's that old guy. But basically, that started America's real involvement in South America, specifically in the 1850s with the Mexican American War, where we took half of Mexico. So, that wasn't a military coup, but it started America's involvement. What really started America's involvement in coups was the Marshall Plan, which came about in the Cold War. So during the Cold War, we all know it's Russia versus America, and it's a battle of ideologies, right?
Communism versus capitalism.
Exactly. So it was those two ideas clashing together, and really America wanted to put its foothold and make sure it protects its interest. Yet so what the Marshall Plan did, specifically in Europe at least, and this is particularly why Russia got involved in South America, was they gave a ton of money to European countries. Now, when you give Europe or any country economic aid, they're going to be indebted to you, and they did a lot of ideology change. So that was a time frame when the Cold War just started, and Russia still is trying to maintain control over these areas. So Russia did not like that at all, and in response, they started trying to spread their ideology through propaganda to everywhere in the world. So they went to South America, and that is when a whole bunch of left, well, it really was a whole world thing. A lot of countries were in economic depressions or recessions, so that really led people to think of it more like a socialist ideology, where they wanted less capitalist and less market, or free market at least, because they saw it as a factor that was ruining their lives, right? So that would really be the background why these coups happened, and why America and Russia got so involved in South America.
A lot of information. And
Sorry,
yeah,
a
no,
little
no, that's good.
introduction.
So,
Um,
so for our last episode, we talked about the Myanmar military coup. It's just going to be it's going to be more of a broader textual what we're talking about today. So, and so far in this decade, there have been two military coups. In 2010, there have been four military coups. So, I would say, like, for a prediction, like, how many military coups do you think is going to happen this decade? Obviously, we don't want them to happen, but like, just for a prediction, like, what do you think? How many do you think is going to happen this decade?
You know, to be completely honest, we probably are never going to know till 50 years after today,
Probably.
because a lot of these coups are under wraps. However, it does seem that the Cold War is really dying down. You could technically say the Cold War is still going on, because U.S. kind of backs coups now, not really. But you know, I wouldn't say there's too many really happening, especially in the future, that is directly caused by other countries, at least.
Okay.
Danny, you brought up one of the declassified documents earlier today. Which one was that?
I think that was the one for Chile. So, fun fact: 7 weeks before the election, one of these coups just got released. So, the National Security Archive has this like little rule in place where they have to unclassify any document if it's past 50 years. So then you get to see a whole bunch of stuff, right? What the government's doing, and they have to declassify it. So you know everything. Of course there's some redactions, but you get to see what happens behind the curtain. And especially in Chile in the 70s, that was definitely a part of the Cold War, because Chile had you could say, socialist government, didn't really get off its feet too much. And we kind of just went in there and said, hey, we got to install this right-wing leader. And it's not really right-wing like as we think of it. They really installed a fascist leader to Chile. I mean, it would be okay, if it was free market and all, but usually when the U.S. goes and does this, the leaders they get from these countries aren't the best people, especially people of, at least in certain Latin American countries. They definitely are dictators in most cases because they are military leaders.
Yeah,
So,
we even talked about that in our very first international episode with Chile, and Pinochet and them breaking away from that regime.
yep, there's a whole lot of countries like that. I mean, Brazil, it happened to, Guatemala, Panama, Nicaragua example. There's a lot of Latin American countries out there that were affected by this. And, particularly it definitely ramped up after the what happened in Cuba with the Russians.
And
But
why do you think military coups are so, it's like they occur so often in Latin America?
that's a great question. So, going back to the Marshall Plan, Russia started ramping up their propaganda campaign worldwide, because not only were they losing China in their communist bloc, just because they were really separating in ideologies and how they wanted to run their country, but they felt like they were losing this idea that they had, right? Where they said they really wanted a lot of countries to become communist, like they were, and kind of unite the world in that way. So obviously, not all countries want that. And it started becoming a clash in South America, where, they would receive this propaganda. A lot of people in Latin America at the time were very poor. And usually when it comes to, revolutions of any kind, it comes from the inside. So these countries, they will revolt against their right-wing leaders, or they'll have a democratic election. That happens sometimes, but not really in Latin America. And when they did, these left leaders would emerge. Now, again, some of these left leaders were good people. Not all socialists are, horrible people, unless you get into trying to become a dictator. But same thing on the right as well. So not all these dictators are bad people. It really depends on the individual and how they're trying to run their system, especially in South America.
Yeah. So far in the United States, we've had zero military coups, and it's a good thing, obviously. But obviously, one thing I really want to ask to both of you guys, is what are the odds that the United States experiences a military coup? I think it's very, very low right now.
I mean, it's funny you say that. I definitely also think it's low, but a lot of people would probably disagree with you just because of what happened.
On January 6th.
Yeah, on January 6th. But you really have to think of the history of America. Like, why did we have a civil war to begin with? The only reason we really had a civil war was this huge economic divide that was happening between the South and the North. And of course, the big topic in that war was slavery. So you had the mixture of both in that. And that's really why we had a civil war. And you could say that would be an attempted coup. There was an attempt on Lincoln's life, so you could say that was a coup. But America, it is divided now, but the people really have a good quality of life, and it will take a lot more probably wealth inequality and unrest in this country for there to be any type of coup. Not saying that it will never happen, but it's not on any road to it.
I mean, about the Civil War, I mean, there were states seceded and became the Confederate States of America, and the battle was, to decide if slavery would exist or not. So if the Confederate States of America won that war, then that it would have altered the future of America. And look, I mean, I'm happy that slavery does not exist in America. I mean, it shouldn't. So, I mean, well, I don't think it's ever close to like that. Though. I mean, Lincoln did not want slavery, period. And what he did, though, the ending slavery is one of the most historic things that any president has ever done.
Yeah, definitely. And that's another thing. Lincoln was a very I would say hard individual, and he's definitely hard to get along with, and that's because he was one of those presidents that needed to be, and the whole Civil War was one of those things where two big issues in America came to clash, and it really separated us. But again, like I said, I don't think anywhere where we are anywhere near there.
Right,
And
I
I
agree.
don't think there will be any coup anywhere in the north, even America, Canada. A lot of first world countries, it's very hard for that to even happen.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that there's not a really big chance of a coup happening here. I'm looking on Wikipedia right now, and I'll share my screen just to show you guys. This is the list of all of them, list of rebellions in the United States. So they did count the January 6th one, and in 2012 was the second most recent one with fear.
In 2008, there was one too in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And that was the first. And in 2008, that was the first one since Watergate. Like that's amazing. Then ever since the one in 2008, there's been three.
There's some countries out there that can't go 5 years without a coup.
Yeah.
That's when you know that we live in an amazing country. Like I think some people like take for granted that that I guess that I don't think the words I'm trying to say, but like that the United States really is an exceptional country. And like if you look at other countries out there, that some they're like Saudi Arabia, like I mean, women don't have any rights. Like they can't even they can only like drive a car and that's it. And they legalized women can drive cars just not that long ago. But like I mean, I just think America is like it's the freest country on earth. If you really think about it, yeah.
I mean, you gotta remember, like with Saudi Arabia too. Like Saudi Arabia wasn't even a thing in like during World War One.
You're right about that.
So like it was. I mean, it kind of throws me back to the movie Lawrence of Arabia. Great movie. Like they had like I think it was 13 tribes or something in Saudi Arabia that were trying to like gain, like they were fighting within each other, but then like because of the Ottoman Empire and everything, they like banded together with the British government and fought back against the Ottomans. And that kind of spills into some other issues with like that's kind of the reason like why oil issues happen there too. A lot of people think that like the British only helped them just to because they knew they had the oil. But I mean, I think that's a lot of why military coups can happen is that it could be about resources in some cases. I know that probably one of them, like most of the U.S. backed ones were during the Cold War and trying to basically just fight back against communism, the spread of communism.
It's good that you brought up resources because people say the Vietnam War there's two reasons behind it. First, obviously, the Cold War had some influence in North Vietnam, and they became communist, and we were trying to save South Vietnam from becoming communist. But usually, especially in Asia, we didn't care about that. It's too close to Russia for us to even be concerned. But the reason why we did is because we got all our rubber from Vietnam. So if you ever want to, poke fun and be like, why did the Vietnam War happen? You could just say rubber, because there was a lot of countries during that time that became communist, but we didn't fight against them, and it's really why there was so much tension in Vietnam for the past 100 years for them, because even the French, they invaded them for the same reason, is they have a lot of rubber.
That's pretty wild. Like once you think about it.
Yeah, you'd be surprised what people do for a little bit of tire,
This is when I Googled this is like kind of where the countries that became communist or developed some sort of communist government shape during the Cold War. So
this is actually a good example of the differences between Americans' approach and the Soviets' approach when doing these kinds of interventions in countries. So America would just do a coup and then install right-wing leader, and that leader would be like the meta guy for them. But Russia, they overthrew themselves, and then once that country was ready, they came into the Soviet Union. That's why you saw Soviet Union increase that much. But as soon as they dissolved, all these countries, came back to fold and became their own.
let me see. Albania is an interesting one. I definitely don't know enough about what Albania went through during the Cold War. And I know that when I was reading something beforehand, we were involved there too.
Oh, I
I see
bet.
you drinking wine, Dan.
Yes. Got to have a little wine to talk about a little history. But yeah,
that should be a quote, right?
It should.
It should. We'll make a little meme with Danny's face and put it on the Instagram.
But yeah, man, Albania definitely was involved in the Cold War, and that was probably our most, like, I guess you'd say, military combat we had, because especially in that area of Europe, we like to send a lot of CIA operatives or any kind of operatives overseas for missions and take out intelligence or spies from Russia. And we would do it in these sectors because spies would be around these countries trying to influence and trying to, like, they could sometimes kill opposition leaders. So that's how we fought really in that area. And the Soviets, they kind of just steamrolled over the country, and they would just sit there and, it's propaganda everywhere. So these people were just taking it all in, and, a lot of the people there hated it eventually, because there's a good saying when you talk about socialism, almost every single socialist like state that has failed is either Marxist or Leninist. There has been successful countries like Catalonia that had like basically anarcho communism, but that's like tribe stuff. It's really far gone from what we have here in a market society. But it's just one of those things where people are not going to take a system that just doesn't work. It's like when you look at Belarus. Belarus's system is a dictatorship, and the people hate it there. And it's not like it's a complete totalitarian regime, right? It's not like North Korea there where they're brainwashing people, and so people are like, I don't want this. So of course they're trying to revolt against that leader because there was a quote unquote election in Belarus. But guess who came out on top?
He somehow won again.
Yeah, wonder how it happened.
U.S. always wins.
So I have a question of, like, if we go back to the Cold War, and let's say the U.S. Neglected to intervene in these foreign coups, what do you think would have been the result of that? Especially since Russia was very interested in a lot of the same countries that we were involved in.
Right.
And yeah.
there would just be a totally different outcome. I think the coups probably would have been a lot worse. But then you would bring back to what people said before, that the U.S. should not be the police of the world. I mentioned this in a previous podcast episode, that that the police should that the U.S. should not intervene in things that they should not be intervening in. So I mean, if it only involves the U.S., then they should get involved. If it doesn't involve them, then they should just stay out of it.
That's a good point. I think what would have happened was you would see, at least in Europe, if we weren't directly involved in Europe, it probably would have been more of a problem, because they had direct control over these countries and they were sending people there and everything. The only reason Latin America started becoming, there was more socialist ideas in Latin America, it was because the whole world was now taking that approach, or at least has seen it. So there was China that was communist, and then there was a lot of European area that was communist. So it was spreading worldwide. That's why you saw a lot of Latin America countries do that. So I think what you would have saw, if we continue to let it happen, I think you would saw certain places like Venezuela, where it would be a kind of Leninist Marxist dictatorship, and eventually people would overthrow. But I also think you would have mixed in there socialist nations that would just work and be okay, because there are that today, especially in Latin America. Like I gave you the example of Catalonia, but obviously today we live in a market economy, so I don't think they would be doing too well, be completely frank with you, unless they adopted a market system. Like for example, the Nordic model. Technically, a lot of those countries are not socialist, even though they have social ideas. The definition of socialism is giving the market to the people instead of companies. So you can't really have both when it comes to that factor. But I think you would definitely see certain successful Latin American nations, and others fail.
Do you still think that the dissolution of the Soviet Union would have happened?
It really depends on the leader, because the only reason that this solution happened in the Soviet Union was because of Gorbachev. Gorbachev, and a lot of people overlook this, he took the Soviet Union in a democratic direction. And they started the approach of being like, okay, so start electing people. That's why you see, why is Putin even having an election, right? When he's just taking the whole control, because the reason why is because Gorbachev set the infrastructure of what is now modern day Russia. So he's the one that turned Russia, into a semi-democratic nation. And then Putin said, nah, I was in the KGB. Let's reverse time a little bit. So that's another reason why I think you could see even more proxy wars like this happening, because Putin is definitely not like Gorbachev, and it's just going to sit down and let anything happen to him.
So do you think that let's continue with our what if scenario here, because I think it's a pretty interesting thing to talk about. So let's say we get the People's Republic of Latin America countries, and they're all kind of relative to the Soviet Union, they're actually tied to the Soviet Union. And let's say Gorbachev did become the last leader of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union dissolved at the same time, or a couple years later than what it initially did. Do you think that all of those Latin American countries would have suffered a sort of economic collapse like a lot of the Soviet states in Eastern Europe did?
Oh, definitely, because it's still under his leadership. So whatever happened in Russia would probably happen to those Latin America states. So if they had an economic downfall, so would them.
I would say that thankfully you brought me to this point, because it brings me a topic I would like to discuss when it comes to at least how America did their coups. So when America went into Latin America, we said, how are we supposed to even get this done? How are we supposed to have a military coup and have these people not instantly just go right back to how they were?
Mhm.
Like, you need to make people upset for any kind of coup to happen. Doesn't matter if it's like people, it's like a social revolution of people or a military one. The people need to be behind it for it to even stick. So what America did to these countries was pretty much bankrupt them. What they would do is they would block trade from all these countries, and trade was their lifeline, because they can't really do a whole bunch, especially during that time overseas. It took time and money to even do that. And America was the big buyer of almost all of their agricultural products at the time. So, to answer that question, I think either way they would be, screwed, unless they were successful in their socialist approach. But another thing you have to remember is the Soviet Union wasn't really interested in the entirety of Latin America. It was only really interested in having direct control in Cuba. Now, why would you ask that? It's because they knew they didn't need all of Latin America. They only needed Cuba because they were able to just throw missiles over the little Gulf of Mexico right there into the United States. And that's why you had so much conflict in that country. But they really had all the international or intercontinental ballistics. They had that in Afghanistan, because that was just over a leap of water. So, that's the reason why you saw, some left and then socialist nations becoming socialist, was because of the propaganda. But, the Soviet Union had too many fish to fry to start trying to take control of Latin America.
I think that just because I'm in my last semester of senior year, so is Anthony. I'm taking a class about China, and part of the requirement of understanding its economy now is understanding the economy of the past.
What's the class called?
And researching it last week, I saw I kind of knew basically what happened, but it was interesting to see the metrics of it and seeing how it formed. I think that the China, in a way, with the politician Deng Xiaoping, he was the one who's the modern architect of the Chinese economy. So obviously, China went from a centrally planned economy to not a free market economy, but it more free than it was. And I think that's where they kind of saved themselves in a way. And I actually wrote in a paper I wrote last week that because of the centrally planned economy that they had, it kind of gave them a base of production to go off of, to produce resources with not as much capital. So bare minimum produce things. And then once they actually get the capital, then it's just it's insane the amount of stuff that they can produce. And you see that now, and I think you're going to see that over the next decade and so on. So my question to you guys is, do you think that there is some, what's the word, benefit of moving from a socialist type of centrally planned economy or government initially, and then moving to a free market? Or what do you think would be better? Or do you think this should just be free market totally, socialist totally? What do you guys think?
There are some countries that were under a communist regime or socialist regime, and then they were on. Then I think some countries the U.S. implemented a democratic system. So, obviously, no country's perfect. Obviously, when the U.S. was founded, we were founded under slavery, but we realized later on that, oh wait, slavery is wrong. We should never have had slavery. So I think really I think it all depends on what the country is founded on. So like Japan, for instance, is now a democracy. Before it was so now I think it was a monarchy. So
Yeah, the empire.
yep. So yeah, it's like it doesn't like, a country can always change what it is. So like it could go from socialist, then go from democracy, or maybe it can go from democracy to communism. Things can change over time. Things aren't promised. That's why so many presidents in the U.S. have always said freedom is never free. Freedom is a tradition that has passed on over generations that we have to keep.
Great point.
Thank you.
Yeah, and what I would say on that point was it would really depend on what kind of socialism we're talking about in these countries. Like I mentioned before, anarcho communism is a form of socialism that was used a decent amount in Latin America, and the people like that particularly because it increased their quality of living for small nations. Only small nations could even pull it off. However, there's certain socialist techniques that are just proven wrong and they won't work. And that is the model that Russia was following, or the Marxist model. So, any country that attempts that is just going to have an extremely hard time when the entire world is a free market economy, globally at least. So, if they were to have any relative success, they would either A, be okay with the quality of life they would get from anarcho communists. Like, for example, you can see certain indigenous people in Mexico living strictly like that, like I mentioned in Catalonia, but that isn't a realistic option for most people. But, if they had a democracy with social aspects in it, I definitely could see it working in the long run. But we really don't know when it comes to certain ideologies of socialism because they haven't really been tried yet. And I don't think any country is going to try them anytime soon because there's a big stigma when it comes to that, and people don't really like living that way. People, they're either going to go for a system that is like anarcho communism where it's like a commune, or they're really going to like how they can alter their reality, and maybe they can have a like a free market approach with social aspects, or maybe they don't even want that. It really depends on the people of the country, and how they perceive quality of life.
So now my next question to you guys, we have 5 minutes left. We'll wrap it up on this one. Do you think that with like a growing socialism movement today, do you think we'll see more socialist type policies in different nations? Not necessarily just our own, but elsewhere as well.
If I were to say, I would say you're not going to see socialism per se. I think a lot of people realize that there's good ideas in socialism, but the root of the word is what causes the problem. It's the fact that markets are not completely free in socialism. However, what the I would say Western European experiment was, or the Nordic model was, we have socialist policies, but they're enacted through a democracy. So say, oh, I as a person or a country want this. Okay, let's cut out this little carve a cake and this is what we have. Maybe free healthcare, maybe free college. There's a lot of European countries that are moving to that model ever since Western European nations started it. So I do feel like, and as the world is there longer, we see that there's more liberal policies being enacted. So I definitely think you're going to see that shift.
Anthony?
I definitely think that the people like think that socialism is a good thing. Probably we'll see more of this stuff coming into play in other countries, especially over the years in the U.S. We've seen a lot more mostly on the left side, socialist legislators and members of Congress who think that socialism is a good thing. Widely known, Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez they all mostly want, they want to, reformat the way the U.S. is, and I'm 100% positive that most people in America are smart enough to know that socialism and communism, have been nothing but been bad things, and I'm pretty sure that that no one in the U.S. wants their freedoms taken away. I know I don't. I'm pretty sure you guys don't either. But regarding what we see in other countries like Cuba, China, North Korea, I'm pretty sure no one, and I mean no one, does not. No one wants that happening in the U.S.
All right, and I think this is a perfect time to announce that Danny and I are going to have a friendly debate next week about socialism and versus capitalism.
Is it good? Does it work? Find out next week.
Will I be moderating that?
And I would really like a moderator, so
all right, I'll moderate then.
Moderate.
I'll moderate.
Yeah,
that works. I mean, hey, maybe we'll get the whole cast together. Everyone can just watch, and it'll be fun.
Yeah,
great.
You can see everyone's pretty faces, or when someone says some bullshit, someone will be like, So definitely something to look forward to. Maybe we might make that like a monthly thing. We have like a monthly debate, like when we bring the whole cast together. I think that's a great idea.
Gotcha.
But for now, everybody, have a lovely weekend, because this will be out on Friday. And get something for your boo for Valentine's Day. If you're not, good thing you don't have to spend any money. So all right, everybody, see you. Have a good one.
Take care.